So in the last session, I have covered how we can have middlewares incorporated into our request response pipeline. There are lots and lots of ready-made middlewares which are existing. They are built-in middlewares. Some of these middlewares we are going to cover now from one by one we'll cover few of them. But of course, you have to just understand with these examples also how a middleware actually can change the request or change the response when it is received from the browser or rendered to the browser. So understanding this pattern is more important than understanding these middlewares which are built in. Of course, built-in middlewares are always there and you are going to use it. But how are these middlewares written, you have to understand, so that the same things can be used when you are writing your own custom middleware. So basically something like, before we write an object-oriented class, it is more important to understand many other object-oriented classes and what are the principles on which they have been written. So we study the existing classes first. The more we study existing classes, the better we can write our own object-oriented class. So something like that. Get good knowledge of the built-in middlewares and understand the pattern to write our own custom middleware. That is the whole idea here. So the simplest one of all, the static middleware. Now what is the static middleware? Whenever we take an ASP.NET project, let's say the same project, middleware demo app I open, every ASP.NET project, whether it is Razor Pages or MVC project, is going to have a folder for all static content. And by default, that is supposed to be www root. Now, this is already pre-configured in the default create default builder. That is already pre-configured to be the default static folder. Now, if in case you want to change the root and you probably want to use some other folder as the static folder for your purpose, then in such case you have to use the middleware use static files. Say for example, now I am going to have a folder called as my static files. And under this I am going to add my static files. It can be probably a new item which is a HTML page, a static HTML page. Let's say demo.html. Now how do I access this? See, if suppose demo.html is right now in www root, imagine, then in browser it is very easy to access. If it is in www root, you just give / and then access demo.html, the root. So here only I type demo.html and it works. But what if I place it outside? I place it here. Then what shall I do? That is where the filter is going to come into picture. So I now go to configure and here I write this code. Use static files. So this we have use static files. We are changing the default implementation now. Now we are saying that our default implementation is going to come from default static files is going to come from this folder. And what also we are specifying is we want to use the folder name at the time of accessing as /static files. Let me explain you. I press Ctrl F5. See, CSS gone, JavaScript gone. Whole layout of the page has changed now because the content is no more being looked into now www root. It's now all moved to my static files, and my static files also when we want to access, we have to write now slash static files slash, let's say, demo.html. This is working. That means now if the whole thing should work as it is, you move this into this folder, everything. And second, here instead of giving it as slash static files, you can give it as the request path root. Just give the root. It says the request path should not end with slash. Just remove this. And everything is intact. And now demo.html. So in case you want to change, you have the ability to change, but you may not want to change. That is the point. So I come back again. The default implementation of use static files uses www root as the static file folder. That means their www root is present here. But if you want some other folder, that can be your static file folder. And you have the choice of mentioning in path if you want to give something. Otherwise, don't give this property at all. Automatically it is taken care of. So that's what is use static files. Now you have the function similarly use web root. Now this use web root actually is the middleware which is setting the content as www root as the root folder. So static files are stored within your project in www root directory, but it can be changed via use web root. But we have changed the folder itself. Use static files folder. Using static files options, I have changed it. Likewise, now we have got enabled directory browsing. Now what is this directory browsing? Let's say now we have got some folder. I'll do one thing. I'll just move this back into the www root and I will remove this. Just to avoid confusion, we generally do not change the static files folder. That's the standard convention to follow www root. Now what I'll do is here, let us say I have a folder called as images. And in images, I may have multiple images files. So in images, I copied some images, let us say my photos or whatever. Some images I copied here. So right now, if I browse and give simply slash images, it's not going to give me any content because the browsing of that particular directory is not allowed. The content of that particular directory cannot be listed. But in case you want to allow the content of that particular directory to be listed in a web page, you will have to use directory browser. That is the middleware you have to use. So now first copy this, use directory middleware. In www root images. But what is the path we are saying? We are going to use my images. So I run this. And now I type here my images and the listing comes automatically. I don't have to do anything to prepare this table. I can just click on one of these images and look at those images by its path. Of course, the problem is what? The right listing is allowed, but the file path is still incomplete because it is giving us my images slash. We just listed the directory, that's it. So we want that to be functional. So what we do is add directory browser. I don't think this is needed now. It was the requirement earlier, but let me add it so that we can probably see the content of that file. So in configure service, I'm saying add directory browser. Actually not required. my images. I'm little. Now the reason my images is not working is probably because the other thing is not done. So let's call this also as images only. Yeah, now it should work. Images, click, yes, the photo has come. The reason actually here is we are not registering this path, we are not registering that static path. So if static path was registered as my images, this would work my images, but that was not registered. Now this is working, you see. So yep, this is something which generally we do not allow for the security reasons. We do not allow directory browsing by default. But if you know something like this is a special case, you may want to allow, but that's a very special case. So this particular thing is automatically going to this folder, getting the list of all files in that folder, creating a table and rendering that table to the browser and stopping the middleware. That means it's short circuiting the middleware. It will probably not let you to continue after that. So that's what is important. Next is this is not required anymore. It was required in the version 1. Serve a default document. Now by default root is being used as the default file. But if you have default.htm, default.html, index.htm, index.html, if these are the files you want to serve, then you should use default files. Otherwise not required, because our default file is rendered by the MVC controller, home controller, action method, index. Instead, if you want these things, just write use default files. And options.default file names. You can add your own custom file name also if you want to. Create a default file option and to that add your own custom file name and then say use default files. Now advantage is when you browse the website without any path, automatically the content of my default.html will be rendered. That is the beauty of it. Just try this option on your own. Likewise, now we have got a consolidated method which does all the things together for you, which is supposed to be used more often than individuals, which we discussed. That is use file server. Now if you use file server, it does the job of static files, it does the job of default files, and it also does the job of directory browsing. All of them together it does in single action. Of course, whether the directory browsing should be allowed or not, you should control that through a parameter. So enable directory browsing true implies directory browsing will be allowed. False is the default value if you do not give anything. So you can just write this instead of writing them individually. So you are changing from www root to static files, and thereafter the static files content is browsable. That is important. All these are different middlewares which are performing some action. So again I repeat, use file server is a combination of multiple such middlewares. Then the exception middleware, we already know it's auto generated actually. We don't even have to write exception middleware code. It's there already. So use default exception page. So right now if there is any exception, let me do something. Intentionally I'll put some exception here. Let's say in privacy I'm throwing the exception. So it is now going to display to us the exception page when we click on privacy. So I click on privacy. This is the developer exception page. It is giving you detailed information about where is the exception, what exactly is the exception thrown. Detailed information is available, which line number is the exception, and complete stack trace of the exception is shown to you right from its origin. But many a times I don't want this to be displayed to the end user. This is dangerous. Your code is getting exposed, and sometimes if there is some critical code, it's going to be very dangerous. You have got queries, cookies, these are the cookies, these are the request headers, basically good enough information for debugging what exactly is the problem. If your code is dependent on cookies, you can use it from here. If your code is dependent on some request header, you can understand whether the request header required is coming from browser to server or not from here. So yes, an exception page is created by ASP.NET Core by default, and we don't have to do anything, just that we have to write the line, and it's auto generated by Studio. Use developer exception page. But the same thing is not safe in case we are doing it for production. So what should be done in production? General practice is, in the home controller only, we are going to have an action method which will get us the data from another page. Basically there will be error view. So here we will see in view under shared, you will find error.cshtml. Now actually, why is error.cshtml not present in home.cshtml, home folder? As per the discussion which we had in the introduction to MVC, I said every action method is supposed to be present in the folder which is by the name of controller. So index is fine, privacy is fine, but error is not like that. Why? Because I would like to have error.cshtml file used for multiple controllers. So those views which we want to have for multiple controllers, we can put them under shared folder. Of course, we'll discuss about the views architecture later, but error.cshtml is here, and it is only displaying some friendly message to the user saying that the site has some problem. Now how do we get this? Now to get this, we have to put our application in production mode. How do we put it in production mode? Go to project properties and JSON file, and here you are actually supposed to change it from development to production. So right now let me switch to IIS Express, and here I'll change it to production. So ASP.NET Core _ environment now is saying that the settings of production should be used and not development. And now if I click on privacy, something to do with probably IIS. Let me switch back here. Yeah, something to do with IIS configuration on my machine. I'll resolve that later. But right now when I click on privacy, it's showing me the friendly message. It is not showing me the stack trace. It is not showing me the error page, which is very important. The developer error page is not shown to the end user. So when the application goes into production, this is the right thing to do. Like this, we have got status code middleware. Whenever a response is rendered to the browser, we always generate some kind of status code. So based on the status code, if the output should change, then we can have a status code middleware. So what is this status code? Let me explain you. Now in browser, whenever a response is rendered, some kind of status code will be rendered to the browser. Now I give 4 demos, let us say. Now this /demo is not there. So when /demo is not there, it is supposed to produce the status code 404. So go to networks, and if I give here something like this, 404 is the status code. So, and it's giving us blank. So now what I'll do is go to the middleware, and here I'm saying use status code page, and in the status code page I am writing some text, my own content I am writing. Status code page, the status code is so and so. And how do we get the status code? Actually it comes from the response. So now if I run this, now give something which is not there, and we get the status code page. That means other than 200 series, if any kind of problem occurs, the status code changes. We have status code right from 100 to 100 to 199, 200 to 299, 300 to 399, 400 to 499, 500 to 599, like that 5 categories of status codes are there. 200 series is considered to be success status code, and all others have some problem or the other. Especially the 400 series is supposed to be the resource not found, resource unauthorized, and stuff like that. 500 series is for something like server side exception thrown. Some kind of exception is thrown on server, and for that 500 series. So if it is not 200, a status code page is supposed to be shown to the user. You are able to now create a status code page by specifying that particular middleware. Some random URL I have given here, which is not there. So it is supposed to give 404. So like that, we are able to give here a status code page. Of course, you can actually do lot more. For each type of status code, for 404, you can produce some different output. For 405, you can 401, basically unauthorized, you can produce different output. That code you can write here conditionally. Now, this particular thing is interesting. What we are doing here is, we are saying map when. Map when was if the context path is some missing page. That means some URL is there, hard coded. We are saying use this middleware, and we are doing a redirect in this middleware to the home controller. Let me copy this and I put it here, /missing page. Now I run this. Missing page, and it got me redirected to home. Got it? I'm giving /missing page and redirected to home. So like that, conditionally we are able to provide a status code page. Some kind of pattern. If you want, you can have a status code page with redirects. So basically what it means is, I'll show you is, I will have, let's say, this whole thing now replaced. Now if I run this, now if I give here ABCD something, it's supposed to go to error/404. Now that 404 is supposed to be a view which we are supposed to create. So here we can actually create a view by name, or rather we have to create not view, sorry, we have to create a error controller, and under error controller we should create methods by the name of number. Like that we will have to do. So 0 there basically is your status code number. So if unauthorized access is done, this will change to 401. So you should have a method by name 401, but such methods cannot exist. We cannot have methods by name 404, 401 and so on. So maybe we'll have to write another middleware which can handle this kind of path. Separately we'll have to write /error middleware and handle them separately. Of course, our MVC architecture cannot handle a number. Method name cannot be a number. Method name is supposed to be some proper name. Identifier is supposed to begin with a character, not a number. So you have to be careful. Another middleware has to be written for something like this. So like this, we have got all these as built-in middlewares to be used in different situations. Again, I am telling you, this is not the end of the story. You may probably want to have many more middlewares on need basis, and you'll have to figure out which one is suitable in a given situation and accordingly use it. But as you have noticed, all the middlewares I'm adding is in configure method only. Everything is being added in the configure method. That's all in this section. Thank you.